An Irish independent digital subscription doesn't just get you the news. It gets you the best of Ireland's stories all in one place. Whether it's the best of politics, business, sport, entertainment or lifestyle. Get it all for just €4 a month for 12 months when you first subscribe. Visit independent.ie/subscribe today. Irish Independent. Terms and conditions apply. Cancel anytime.
Sorry, give me 2 seconds to put these headphones in. People think that this is going out by mistake. And I understand why you think that. But it's not. What are we doing here? I suppose we're... on day one, we said, well, let's just go into the studio and chat away. There's the microphone. And Paul hit record. And then said, I'm going to put that out. It's a kind of, it's a nice intro on day one, a little bit behind the scenes. And then I was like, it sounded nice. And he said, I'll hit record tomorrow. Yeah. He said, next day, it's nice again. We'll hit record again. But, sorry, I'm throwing paper bags around the room. Sorry. Yes, we're. I think a lot of people understand we're just getting settled and getting going, and the music starts, and that is the show. But I think even if we had really left in something by accident, I would have said by last Wednesday, both of us would have been cancelled.
That's why you kept marking it every day. You're here again, Colin. You're here again, Colin.
Yeah. No, Paul so far has protected us. No. So do not be alarmed. This is just us settling in, getting cozy. But don't worry, we will start the podcast, well, now. Welcome. Finland, Ireland on Thursday evening in Helsinki. Dan McDonnell is boarding a flight today. He'll be over there, but he's in with us first to look ahead to the game, to chat generally about where Heimir Hallgrímsson is. Dion Fanning also in studio, I'm happy to say. The two boys on the way very shortly. Conan, hello.
Hello, Joe.
Few things going on, just to give you a little catch up on the world at large. Back page of the paper today, quite a few papers today. James Ducker in the Independent. Ten Hag believes he is safe from United sack. Is the word if you're interested. This is all on the back of an executive committee at Old Trafford today. All the brains trust are there. Ratcliffe, Joe Glazer has flown in. Brailsford, Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth, Jason Wilcox. To be fair, it's not specifically to discuss Ten Hag's future. This was a scheduled meeting. They do this obviously once every month or two anyway. But given circumstances, there was a degree of, I wonder what they might be talking about. Ten Hag feels things are okay. I suspect they are.
Well, Joel Glazer flew in because he found out it was a meeting about not doing anything. And it was like, well, I'll definitely be there. I'm your man for that. Inactivity, I'll show up to that meeting, no problem.
Leinster-Munster build up in the media. 70,000 at Croke Park, Rory O'Connor told us yesterday on Not the Monday panel, which is some going. So yesterday morning, Leinster, it turns out, they were doing media. They had Professor Paul Rouse of UCD, historian, to speak to the players about the significance of Croke Park. Spoke to the players for 20 odd minutes, I suppose. You could kind of assume, well, don't the players know about Croke Park? But it's not just Irish players in there, and maybe a sense build-up is what they're going for. Now, it seems Robin McBride was talking, their coach, and he was saying, well, one of the big messages from Paul Rouse was, don't make more of this than what it is either. Before Northampton last year, James McCarthy, the Dublin footballer, went in to speak to them. So they do kind of make a thing of Croke Park. The other news is that Peter O'Mahony is out. Ollie Yeager out as well, injuries. And then I guess the only other thing, the dust is settling on this Manchester City victory over the Premier League, a 175-page finding. It's kind of noteworthy to see the two sides of this. So the Premier League witnesses, i.e. in the Premier League corner, we had Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs, Brighton, West Ham. You also had Brentford, Bournemouth, Fulham and Wolves writing letters of support for the rules, whereas very much against them were Chelsea, Newcastle and Everton, who all acted as witnesses for City. I'm sure there's a degree of spin on all sides here. A few things are being said over the last 24 hours. There is certainly a fair degree of criticism for the Premier League, as in you've drafted unlawful rules. That doesn't sound great on your part. Premier League is called for a big meeting next week. But a lot of lawyers who are talking to the media are also making the point, this is not like a resounding victory for City in that quite a lot of the rules have been upheld. We talked yesterday about open season, the Wild West.
Yeah.
That may not come to pass. I think it's all a touch unclear at the moment. And I'm sure the Premier League can redraft rules that are legal. So it's hard to know to what extent this is going to transform the landscape. But certainly there's spin on both sides at the moment.
I'm happy now that we declared yesterday that hell had broken loose, just to alarm all their listeners out there. The statements from both parties here reminded me of like a LinkedIn post, where you can't actually figure out, has this person gotten the demotion or not? Because it's all spin. It sounds great. But reading through the lines, I'm trying to figure out what's happened in their place of work. Are they going up or down? I'm not too sure.
Are you on LinkedIn?
I am, yeah, but I'm more of a lurker on LinkedIn.
What are we all doing with our LinkedIn output? Now, I don't put anything out there, but nobody's talking like a human being. And everyone's pretending that it's all very normal what people are saying.
It is very interesting to me all the time. People you might follow on Instagram and you have them on LinkedIn as well, and it's completely different personalities. And look, I'm the same. Yeah.
It's all just so transparently fake. I mean, it's the fakest website on the planet, and that's going some.
Is there something nice about having a place where you're actually happy to say, did this at work? And I know it's all spin, and I know there's a lot of, it's not massaged. But like I did put up a video of you joining the Irish Independent, and it's like, can't wait to get stuck into this.
Take that down. God's sake.
Highest engagement. Yeah, I'm going to put up more Joe Molloy videos.
I can't. It's really strange. You say it to any of your millions of friends. What was that? I saw your LinkedIn post. That's not you. And their answer is always, yeah, I know. You just got to play the game.
You got to play the game.
What are we all doing playing the game for?
Yeah, but I suppose it's like a job interview, only for social media.
I know. But like that kind of fakery, that's what's wearing us all down. Can I hit you with some emails?
Please do.
In no particular order, and then we'll get into Dan and Dion very quickly. Keep them coming in. They're much appreciated. Indosportpodcast at independent.ie. Indosportpodcast at independent.ie. Hi, Joe. This one is bullet pointy, to the point. Hi, Joe.
Love that.
Lower the microphone, full stop. We can't see you, full stop. Best of luck with the new initiative, full stop. Vince Carney. Vince, I will try. Sorry. Just trying. I'm striving for audio quality over visuals. More visuals in a moment. Hi, team. I like that. Team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Put some respect by Conor Darley's name. Big fan of the show so far, full stop. Nice listening to Joe again. Thank you. Not the Monday Panel's a terrible name. Full stop. It's incredibly uncool. Killian follows up by saying, Overreaction Monday is better, full stop. Maybe it's not perfect, but without question, it's better than what you went with, full stop. It's not too late to change.
I'm worried I've opened a can of worms when I was praising Danny yesterday for his directness and his full stop usage.
I think you've started something.
Yeah.
Killian, we genuinely can't stomach the thought of having to find a name for that panel ever again, so you're stuck with it. It is too late to change, I'm afraid. Keith G said, the best GA sledging is a full forward coming on and telling the full back, the bit of weight suits you, which is, it's old school, but good school. And then, I'm curious, by the way, is anyone else having this experience? Because somebody said it to me personally that they were having a similar experience in the car. I haven't noticed this, so maybe it might be to do with the speakers in your car or the way you have your setup and stereo and mono and all manner of things I don't understand. Hi, fellas. Congrats on the new show. Best of luck with it. I just wanted to let you know the sound quality seems a little off to me. I listen to a lot of podcasts while driving my truck and the sound is up and down a good bit, as in the volume. Sometimes when Joe is talking, it can go very low and then sound a bit shouty when he's talking more enthusiastically. It seems the different persons talking are at different sound levels. Brian, thanks for the email. Thanks for the heads up. I am throwing it out there. If anybody else is having that issue, let us know. I listen mainly on... Well, I don't listen all that often, obviously, for obvious reasons. I've been listening on headphones and it all sounds fine. But obviously, if there's a technical situation, shout out there. And then finally, Dom Moore was in touch. Dom is one of many to have made this point. Hi, Joe and team. Firstly, congratulations on the new job. I've watched everyone so far and I'm enjoying it. I've posted a few messages already on the comment section on YouTube. I hope you don't mind my observations so far about the set, the studio from which you are broadcasting from. It needs work. It looks like you're in a canteen or an old office. I know you're only beginning this journey, but I watched Off the Ball all the time over the years on YouTube, and I thought the set was really inviting to the eye. Your set, though, is so bland and beige, if you don't mind me saying so. Please, please get someone to get this sorted. You deserve better. You are worth it. A loyal follower from the home of Ronan O'Gara, Roy Keane and many more. It all makes sense. Other than that, I'm enjoying it, so far. Many congrats, Dom Moore. Dom, not the only one. This is not breaking news to us. We have eyes. We've seen this. We've seen the situation. The good news is, Dom, and it was meant to be done some time ago. God, it's hard to get things done, builder-wise, carpenter-wise, all manner of business. This was kind of due to be upgraded a while ago, so that is imminent. We have the order in for some panels. I'll save suspense. There's some kind of nice wooden panels in, and we're going to spray and paint them kind of a dark-ish colour grey, and they're going to go up. I think the TVs are going to come down, and the lighting is going to be improved, which I have to say I'm thrilled to hear, because I'm looking at myself the last week going, oh God. So I think 4 weeks, maybe 5. Yeah. We're going to be looking resplendent.
Oh yeah, you're going to look like you're in Studio 2 in Ballymount again.
Listen.
This reminds me, and I appreciate all the many YouTube comments that everyone has pointed out.
But you know what? They're right, though.
100%, and like it actually is great, and it's great that people are supporting you almost. It's like, here's how you can do better. Like, it's almost like they're cheering you on from the stands, which is great.
We have a video studio and an audio studio. So Dan and Dion is actually done in the video studio today, but we're in the audio studio. Conscious we had an email in saying the sound is an issue too today, so uh-oh.
You got me there.
Yeah, that is us. Republic of Ireland against Finland in Helsinki. This is the third match of our intrepid Nations League journey 2024, swiftly followed by Sunday night in Athens. Very happy to say, ahead of flying out this evening to Helsinki, Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent here in studio. Hey, Dan.
How's it going?
And Dion Fanning of the Free State Podcast, also a football journalist, of course. Once upon a time of this building, many years ago, Sunday Independent.
That's right. Hey, Joe.
Nobody truly escapes Talbot Street.
Well, that's right. Well, I only ever visited. So the experience I had today when I came in, being presented with a temporary swipe card was always my experience, because I'd come back from London trying to navigate the building. Dan found me kind of circling,
just wondering when the corridor
looking for where to swipe. This is so it was all very familiar. Like, I'm trapped. Someone let me in.
Yes.
So it's good to be back in that experience.
Well, good to have you in. Finland. I mean, the short version. We're talking largely about Ireland, but just to jog memories, recent history with Finland. It's sort of, when I read it, I was like, oh yeah. 2 meetings right in the teeth of COVID 4 years ago. Stephen Kenny, it was his first home game, you might remember. So they lost 1-0 home and away to Finland under Kenny. And if you're curious about Finland in the meantime, they have the same boss in Markku Kanerva. He's been there since 2016. And before that, I suppose some parallels with Ireland. He was the under-21 boss, but he was the under-21 boss for 11 years. And Euros, they got to the playoffs. Unlike ourselves, they got to the playoffs and lost to Wales. There was pressure on the FA over there to sack Kanerva. He's changed his entire backroom team. And if this sounds familiar from a couple of years ago, they're embarking on a more progressive style of play. So that's the Finnish situation. Currently ranked 64th in the FIFA World Rankings. Ireland are 62. And we both lost to England and Greece last month. So that's a brief scene set. Dan, Heimir Hallgrímsson, are you impressed by him? What strikes you about him over the last month?
Impressed by him. I mean, I don't know. That's a difficult one to answer. I probably haven't spent a huge amount of time around him, I suppose, at this stage. He was announced sort of during the Euros. I sort of wasn't as unveiling. I did a few things after I wasn't really around. So probably had a sort of a shallow enough level of interaction really at this stage. He is definitely someone who I think is quite confident in his own in himself. He's not sort of there's nothing sort of showbiz about him. He's sort of quite, his demeanor is sort of very much, he'll sort of say what's on his mind, I think, which obviously at times maybe hasn't always helped him. I think last month, sort of I was asking some people around the FAI when he made the comments about, say, I don't know enough about the players at this stage, which I think is really strange. And I think, I'm sure we'll discuss that. And then the comments where he appeared to be sort of delegating a lot of responsibility to O'Shea and John O'Shea and Paddy McCarthy. And then obviously he was a little bit more active on the sideline against Greece, which I did think, okay, that's a little bit unusual. That seems a little bit reactive to it. So maybe not as confident as you might think. You maybe feel the need to respond to it. But generally speaking to people around that time, they were like, well, that's just the way he is. He doesn't sugarcoat it, even though it might have been better to sugarcoat some of those answers. But yeah, like you hear the stories about him when he was Iceland manager, and it probably gives more of a window to his personality, because that's what he's like probably in his own. Like, he lived there for pretty much all of his life. It's only really his success in Iceland that has given him the chance to travel with football to Jamaica and now here. Prior to that, as we know, he was like an Iceland football man. Yeah. And there's the whole stories about him, giving a sort of a tactical talk to the supporters in the pub an hour before the game. Like, I think that probably shapes you in some respects. You're like very relaxed in that environment, and you can probably see that with him sometimes. Like, even after the squad announcement the other day, it's sort of unusual. I mean, I'm doing the Ireland beat, whatever, I don't know, 18, 20 years now. And like at times, like you'd chat away to the managers. There was always this perception, like, I think, Stephen Kenny was media darling, but there was never any small talk with Stephen Kenny really around Ireland squads at all. He'd sort of keep his distance, and that's always sort of been his way, really, unless maybe away from a squad you might meet him, and that could be different, but not when he was in camp, in that mode. And Heimir, after the squad announcement last week, and finished his various daily papers, Sunday paper, and then you're going to go into back to the working room after. He just comes in and just sits at the back of the room and joins in the conversation. It's really unusual, but like, he did speak at the weekend about how he was surprised maybe by the scale of the media stuff around the Ireland job, which is kind of funny when you think you've come from Trapattoni, who was sort of amused almost by the parochial sort of nature of the Irish beat, I think, relative to like facing the world's media when he's sort of manager of all these great clubs. For him, it's almost a step up in terms of scrutiny, and but I don't think you hear people, geez, this guy's a nightmare or whatever. He seems affable enough and confident enough. Whether he's the man to do the job, I mean, that's obviously a completely different discussion.
What are your initial impressions, Dion?
When I hear him speak certain things, I hear him say, I think that makes sense. That does make sense. The stuff he said about getting a settled team, like there isn't, and I think that's probably right with the players we have. There's not a huge, you may as well have a settled team, because the difference between some of them is marginal. I think he's a journeyman manager. We're a journeyman team. So I don't think we can be saying, surely, where's Pep Guardiola? We've got a manager that actually probably there were better managers out there. If the FAI had pursued it in a different way, they could have got better managers. But I don't think necessarily we should be wondering why we haven't got a more accomplished manager, or a manager with a greater CV. I think he has been. Clearly, I think it's interesting what he said about the job and the media, because Martin O'Neill also said that. He was supposed to have privately talked to, I think it was David Moyes or somebody. He was meant to have confessed, like, the Irish media, they're unbelievable. Like, they're just, and now that's O'Neill, and O'Neill, we all had our experiences with O'Neill, who, again, like, I've interviewed O'Neill. The only times I interviewed O'Neill properly was before and after he was the Ireland manager job, and had a totally different experience with him than when he was Ireland manager. And he was prickly and difficult, and whereas before, and you're coloured by this, when he got the job, I thought, this is great. We're all gonna have a great time with Martin O'Neill, and then he was how he was. But I think the Irish job, from a media point of view, it is quite relentless. Now it's extraordinary how it's gone with Hallgrímsson in terms of losing the first two matches under pressure already. Suddenly the end of his contract seems quite you're like, it's kind of looming into view already. He's talking about, maybe I won't actually move to Ireland. I'm only going to be here. I'm going to be here as long. And you've got a housing crisis. I can't find anywhere to live anyway. Maybe Simon Harris will blame Hallgrímsson for the housing crisis next. He suddenly looks like a very temporary.
Yes. Someone said that yesterday in the panel. I feel like he's just going to be here and then gone just as quickly.
Yeah. But I think there is something in that. There isn't, the media around the Ireland manager. We are looking for, and this is why I remain, if only he could have won a few matches, I was going to say I remain a Stephen Kenny advocate in principle. I accept he couldn't continue in the job any longer because results were so bad. But the general idea of what he wanted to do had some merit, and I think Hallgrímsson really, on the other hand, he's been stunned by just that appetite from the media for somebody to fix this, fix this problem, because Irish football, and it is really, it still takes up a disproportionate amount of, and the discussion about the manager within that framework and what he's doing takes up a disproportionate amount of time in football coverage. Because, let's face it, there's an awful lot of, when the players couldn't get, and I don't cover the Ireland team like I used to, so maybe I'm wrong, but when players get put forward, I imagine, one of the things that made me relieved that I never had to, I didn't have to cover it regularly was...
This is Dan's life you're talking about.
No, but Dan makes it interesting. Dan actually makes it interesting. But I think, when you sit down, you go, okay, I don't want to pick on one player, but who's going to write up the Kieran Clark quotes? And I'd be like, does anyone have to write up the Kieran Clark? Please don't write up the Kieran. Don't send me. I've sat through 15 minutes of Kieran Clark. I don't need to see the quotes ever again. And nobody's interested in what Kieran Clark is doing. And I don't want to pick on one player, but just that sense of there's not an awful lot of interest out of the squad other than the manager. And Evan Ferguson now being a good, an exception to that. Yeah. And you can see in the coverage.
Yeah, and Kelleher sometimes as
well. But Kelleher's a good example. And Kelleher comes in and he talks about his Liverpool situation.
And it goes, the story almost, you do a story on Kelleher and it takes off. See,
is your point there then that if you're the manager, you then wake up and look at the paper and you think, whew, they're kind of talking about Kelleher and Liverpool as opposed to yet another what's going on with Ireland.
Well, what is the Irish, this is the thing, what is Irish football culture? What is it? And around the international team, it is generally, it's the culture of the manager. It's laid down. There was a great clip last week that, it's a Killian archive who does the old sort of Archie footage. I know the guy. And it was an amazing sort of 5-10 minutes. Did you see this?
Is it the managerial
interview in 1996? Would you possibly have been covering that at the time? Would just coming into it maybe, or just before? Yeah. But putting years on you there. But it was, I couldn't believe it. It was like, it's like, when there's a change of government and you see all the ministers walking in and out of Leinster House, you're like, oh, he's got health, what's he got today? Oh, he's junior minister or whatever. And this series of Premier League years managers turning up at a hotel in Dublin to be interviewed publicly, not publicly interviewed, but as in they're coming out afterwards. How did it go, Mike Walker? Yeah. So he's getting a taxi. Joe Kinnear was a working manager at the time. It's been when you think about this, where the Irish job sat. I mean, it was a big gig at that stage as well. Who else? Liam Brady's in the lobby.
Dave Bassett outside. But the other thing was that this is a very boring point. But was that the airport hotel?
I think it was the airport.
It was like these. And I think the report by Tony O'Donoghue was something like, the FAI had hoped to meet in secret. It's like well, maybe don't meet right where everybody meets for every Irish football gathering happens at the airport hotel. If you you didn't really put any effort into meeting in secret.
But then you had the three FAI officials are again they're posing for photographs, holding a briefcase like they've got the budget ready or something, right? And it's such an.
I feel like we should cut Mark Cannon some slack here.
It's such an illuminating clip to me, I mean, and again, it's funny, but it's also sort of depressing as well. Because what do you demand? Even the administrators, it's this is the mid 90s, right? If you look at the Irish team at the moment, the absolute one thing Stephen Kenny was right about was the dearth of players produced in the 1996, 97. Look at that age, and that's a big thing with the profile of the Ireland squad at the moment. You've got the class of 1992, our class of 1992, not as high profile, but you have Robbie Brady, Hendrick, Matt Doherty, Shane Duffy, John Egan. And then you have probably the 2002 onwards, which is like Nathan Collins is that year, Troy Parrott, Gavin Bazunu. And there's very little in the middle. If there are, Queven Kelleher's one, but in terms of, say, home-produced players. So this is like the wasteland era, of that time. And yet, I guess, like, the culture of what we demanded from our administrators in Ireland was to land the manager. Your job was to land the manager. And even through the John Delaney era, his cushion, his thing to fall back on was maybe a glamour appointment or a little bit of information about the appointment, or, you could qualify for a couple of tournaments by throwing money at an appointment. And football in this country is in a great state. You have this sort of the mid-market current affairs thing. Irish football is a great state because you're qualifying, and there's like nothing happening. But in a way, that is our culture. That's what we demand, really, of the FAI. And over the last year, again, what are we talking about? What about the process that they've delivered a manager by? Now, it wasn't a good process, right? But again, we're now hoping that this manager can like spirit us to a different level, because that's all we know.
Well, a few thoughts. I mean, it's no surprise when you look at our footballing history of, the committee picking teams into, having managers, and Giles pushed that, and then you're into own hand. But then suddenly a saviour arrives and transforms our footballing experience in Jack. And so we've chased that ever since. And it's natural. And to be fair, I think every country, the manager and the cult of the manager is a big thing. I'd sort of defend the way we talk about football in this country over the last 10, 15 years. Like, I distinctly remember talking to Dion in 2012 when we were much younger looking, and we had a chat, and you at that stage were like, I'm so sick of the manager talk. Football is in crisis in this country. I think for the last at least 10, if not 15 years, I think the way we've talked to about football has been a touch more mature and rounded, and we talk about the FAI a lot, we talk about the problems a lot, but like, it's only natural. Of course we're going to be interested in the manager. If Heimir Hallgrímsson is not a good manager, then we're in for another bad 18 months.
But the other thing is, and it's funny you go back to 2012, because I was going to mention, and being in Talbot Street, it comes back to me, because you won't find this piece online.
What else comes back to you?
I'll get into that later. But I wrote, after the Euros in 2012, I wrote a piece about what Irish football needed to do. We lost every game.
Yeah.
I talked about other countries who'd done various things. I talked to a coach, Marco Sullivan, in Sweden, and a guy from Cork. I talked to somebody else who had provided some money for the FAI to the Emerging Talent Programme. He delivered the line that the FAI will say anything to get your money, but it won't go where it's supposed to go. That line appeared in the copy. We got a long letter from the FAI pointing out that, the greatness of the Emerging Talent Programme. How Ireland had won various games against underage teams, all this kind of stuff, and then making a defamation claim about that line.
Okay.
Piece was taken down. Now, I'm not saying if that piece was online. I'm not making the point that if that piece was online, we could have saved Irish football. But the sentiment rings very true. The point is that this is how and we know how football was managed under John Delaney. Yeah. But this is how debates were dealt with. We're going to object to everything you say, and also we're going to put in a defamation claim. Yeah. And for various reasons, which I won't go into here, it was like, okay, let's just take that down.
The debate was possibly stifled a touch.
Well, no, yeah, but it was just, but the point is that you bring up 2012. Yeah. We're still here. We can have a conversation now about money and where it should go, and I'm hugely sympathetic in principle to what the FAI are trying to do. I heard you talking about it last week with John Green, and talking about how they've blotted their copybook with the government, and I understand that to a degree. But I look at this government, and I go, this government, these people, you've blotted your copybook. You don't. They're not here to mark your copybook. They're pathetic. And like now, it says something about the FAI that maybe
they're slightly more pathetic.
They're more pathetic. And I would also, and this is the thing, when I say in principle, if they were given the money they're looking for, I'd be saying, who are you giving this money to? Because there's nobody from the FAI. I would put the League of Ireland clubs, all these things. You've got to be really careful how this money is spent, because nobody has a good track record. Irish football, at every level, I'm sorry to say, has a pretty much unbroken track record in failure.
Can I bring it back to more pressing matters for a moment? That's all really interesting and thoroughly important. On Hallgrímsson, Dan, just square the circle for me. Dion referenced that last month, the overriding message from Hallgrímsson was looking at the number of games we have, looking at the importance of the games next year. My mission here, and based on my experience in Iceland, is to find my first 11 and then to play them over and over again until we develop relationships on the pitch. That's how I see this working. And now with this squad announcement, there feels like a degree more experimentation and wanting to have a look at people. And Matt Doherty, still hugely important for us, but so out you go. And you might come back in for the bigger games next year. But then the glaring kind of contradiction there. Maybe that was just to save Matt Doherty's blushes. However, if you were to be alarmist, you'd say it's slightly muddled thinking. Or if you were to be very fair about it, you would say, let's cut this guy some slack. He's had 2 games. It's hard to find your first 11 straight away. So let's allow him to do that. Where are you on that one?
Yeah, like somewhere between the two. And this is it. And I am very conscious, and I'm actually very conscious of this with Hallgrímsson generally. Probably haven't been like very, very supportive. And I still think the Stephen Kenny project was the right thing to do. But then, people can be very patient with that and then like just flip to attack doc mode after like 2 games, which would be the worst. Like that's the most reactionary thing. I'll just go the other way, or you suddenly you're glass half empty with everything some person does versus glass half full with someone else.
Sorry to interrupt. It's a brief interruption. I think what's happened is that in the last 2 years, and someone must look at the stats. This is possibly the worst 2 years in the history of Irish football, the national side. So in the last 2 years, the only team that Ireland has beaten is Gibraltar. So I think where Hallgrímsson is suffering is that you listen to somebody like Keith Tracy, for instance, a brilliant pundit, and he's at a point where he's like, I've had enough. I don't care anymore. Don't talk to me about tactics. Let's just win some games. And I think a lot of people are at that point.
They were, and that was the language, like probably that was used by the interim team, in their campaign, really, as it was earlier this year to sort of to try and get the job, which is fair enough. I understand it's a great honour to like manage your country, and there was a campaign element. Oh, let's bring Brian Kerr back, and let's talk about winning games. And then it's not that easy, and relatively quickly now, this stuff about, you want to get away from the process, but then you're talking about, well, we now need to experiment because it's the World Cup games next year that are very important. It's like, no, like this is what people have been saying throughout the year. Like this is the reason why those windows were wasted, because these Nations League games are important. They are important for your seeding for 2026. They're important for your seeding for 2028. You said there at the start, Finland got to a playoff the last time we didn't. The reason Finland got to a playoff the last time was because of their historical results. Yeah. And what happens if you qualify for a tournament, you're high enough up the Nations League ranking, it keeps you around. So Ireland got a playoff the last time, the Stephen Kenny won Slovakia, not because of one of these great sort of confusions that Mick McCarthy got into a playoff. He didn't. It was Martin O'Neill's results.
So I sense frustration on your part because Finland represents our best chance at 6 points in this group, and we're messing around.
If Ireland finish 4th in this group, their chances of being involved in Euro 2028 are going to be affected negatively. The next World Cup would be nice to get to it. I appreciate, and again, if you have a manager who's in, and to me, like Heimir Hallgrímsson, the thing about him is, like Stephen Kenny, there was almost a vocational aspect to the job. I think for Heimir, it's a gig. Yeah. And you have to accept, you appoint a manager for whom it's a gig, then it becomes a gig. And
to be fair to him, it's a big gig in his life.
Yeah, it is, but it's a job. And that's the thing, and he's approaching it like a job. He doesn't have any of the baggage of the Irish football history.
Which is probably why he's then stunned by
the reaction
and the emotional, this sort of psychic weight that comes towards him.
To what he feels are perfectly reasonable things.
What do you understand about Ireland?
He's watching the Greece game going, well, I can see improvements here because he hasn't been through Ireland losing to Greece before, whereas we've all been through that like really recently. Yeah. So I think there is that sense of, like, I think how it's hard to take issue really with how he's approaching it, but what he says winds people up because of what we've been through over the last period of time.
The other thing is he doesn't have anything to throw. He doesn't have much to throw on the table. As it's not Trapattoni. Like, you know, it's not.
There's no huge credit in
There's
the
no
bank to
huge
begin with.
CV to go. Like, you know, you can go Iceland. Like, you know, and before the England game's been asked about Iceland beating England, and you know, he actually gave a very honest answer, which was like, this England team is.
But
he is starting to say then. Sorry, he's starting to fall back on some of these things that the quote unquote like outsiders. I know, be careful about those terms. Martin Neal wasn't very much not an outsider. I know that would have offended him, but someone who probably again not necessarily been immersed in the football culture here. Such as it is, but the language of, well, we don't have a Bale, we don't have a Robbie Keane. And when people start to hear that, like Stephen Kenny's line was never speak negatively about the players at all. Already, Hallgrímsson like goes into self-preservation mode, like any experienced manager does, says, well, what am I working with? There's not much difference between these players. Like Jake O'Brien, you're big Jake O'Brien that you're talking about. Well, we're going to bring in Mark McGuinness for this camp because there's not really much difference between these players. It's like that's the language that was, you know, we don't speak in those terms, and now he's bringing it back. And that pragmatism, some will love, and some will think. But
again, that speaks to the distance. And again, maybe going back to that O'Neill. Supposed private conversation about the media, because the managers, and you know, Trapp had that too. Like, you know, I remember, what did he say when James McLean came on? You know, like, from the cheer, it was like Pele or Messi or whatever.
But sorry,
we build up, we get very, and look,
I'm with them, Dion. I think we all do need to have a bit more self-awareness about the way we're going on about the team and chill out a bit and be a bit fairer to this manager.
That's fine. That comes back to then what are we doing this for? Like, what are we doing with the Ireland team? What do we want from the Ireland team?
To qualify for a major
Is that it? Yeah. Like
which by extension puts more pressure on the manager.
But also 2012 we qualified for a tournament and it did nothing for us.
Well, I don't understand. I separate what's going on in Irish football at large with what the national team are doing. I separate it. I think we get to a major tournament, we have a shot at it, everybody had a good time, it would have been nice to win a game, we didn't. But 2012, that's okay with me. The problem with 2012 is the gnawing frustration was that in the background there was nothing happening domestically with the game. So I think all the international managers, they don't need to think about League of Ireland. They don't need to think about underage structures. It's not their responsibility. He has to come in and do his job, and that is absolutely fine by me.
Well, Martin O'Neill, the day he took over, said, I hear we've got a great couple of 16-year-olds in the underage squad, but what good is that to me?
I think that's a fair comment.
How long was he in the job?
25 years.
By the time he, you know, and who were those players? Were they Jack Grealish? Were they Declan Rice? By the time he left the job, those players would they have been part of the Irish setup, or would they have gone somewhere else? They were then ready to play.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're coming in like Hallgrímsson for whatever it's what's left now, 15 months, 15 months maybe, and I agree with you. And I think...
Sorry, if there's someone in 15 months who might be good enough to play for the team, then yes, he should be aware of that player.
But in
obviously.
theory, if he's successful, he wants to stay for 3 years.
Well,
that's the thing.
Look, he should be aware of who are the talents coming through. That's a given. That's part of his job.
But then where does that line? Because you're saying it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So where does the line?
No,
where does the line stop?
The lines, it's not his responsibility to develop the 13, 14, 15-year-old. If there's somebody who's 16, 17 and Heimir, we think this guy in 2 years could be really good, maybe think about looking at him now, then of course that's his job to look at that individual. But like this big broad conversation that we're having, I think it's unfair to put that on the manager and to take out frustration almost on the manager.
But I wonder, that's what I mean. I wonder, okay, if he wins some matches, then lots of this disappear. I thought, like, watching people boo after the Greece game, and again, there is a football culture point to be had here because there's people going to Ireland matches, and it's, you know, I don't know. I just feel if you had a really thriving, healthy, proper football culture, this would be the top. This would be the icing on the cake, rather than it's. And you know, we talk about the attendances, which is great again in for international matches. But again, that's probably because there's so many people who think, oh, I can go and see a game of football now.
Yeah.
In other countries, and we compare it to other places in Europe where they're going to see football matches every week. And I know attendance are right. I know this is a very good time, but it's coming from such a low base. Like, and it's brilliant and needs to keep going, and it needs money and it needs all that stuff. But there is a problem there, and I think when you see people booing after 2 matches, I agree with Dan. Like, it's the wrong thing to do. But if he keeps losing matches, he doesn't have any. Not only doesn't he have a CV, he doesn't have any. Like, he doesn't have any real credit in the bank. He doesn't have a Stephen Kenny approach or an idea or what he wants or anything like that. So it's very tricky for him. And then he does then have to revert to the kind of, we don't have a Gareth Bale, lads.
Yeah.
Why are you
and
making
the problem
these
with that,
demands
Joe,
of me?
I would come in, and this is the thing.
I think it's unfair to say he doesn't have an approach. We don't know that yet. I'm sure he has an approach.
But
Iceland had an approach,
But
What do you mean an approach?
like a tactical approach.
Well, no, I think I meant in terms of a broader
Philosophical type thing.
But
Yeah,
Joe,
yeah, sorry.
but that scrutiny on the manager, unfortunately, is a product of the, again, we're coming back to this football culture point again, but like, if Heimir comes in, and I think people have to accept he's got a really tough job.
Yes,
he's a very
they
tough
do,
job.
yeah.
I do accept that. Equally, and this became the point with Stephen Kenny after a while with criticism, Heimir's also been paid £500,000 in a country where, there's hardly any work for coaches, and there's people, every week who are sort of, doing this for nothing, next to nothing, ex-players, people. So you have to understand. It's why there was
No,
an
I'm with you.
attitude.
He's 2 games
there was,
in.
there was an. There was,
He's
no,
2 games
no, I
in.
get that, but that's what. But you're saying in general, like, this is why there's a scrutiny, and unfortunately, you can't get away from it all being interlinked. You say it's all this is over here, it's all over there. Like, we are in this. Things are so bad at the moment. Like, the FAI next year are probably, they're trying to do a. I know you want to talk about the match, and we end up coming back to this, but you just can't get away from it. You can't get away from it that I've now even come to the point where I thought the Euro 2028 thing was almost, this is just like a waste of time.
Yeah.
This is a vanity project when
Yeah.
we've nothing done. And now I've had to come around to going, this is possibly the only way to get money. Like this is how bad it is. Like, I think they're projecting a substantial loss next year. And sadly, this is the product of our culture that's come over a period of time, is that you need the senior team to win, because we're that broke otherwise. This is the only quick hit finance you can get,
Yeah.
because they can't get any. So now you have this situation where it's like, yeah, getting to a tournament is the only way to maybe address that situation. It actually is all connected.
And yet, I don't want to broaden it out even further, but yet, when they had somebody as a candidate for CEO who was known for her ability to negotiate with government, and I talked to people, I wrote a piece for the Irish Independent about Sarah Keane a few weeks ago for the review section, and you talk to people about that, and one of them, the football community might react badly to
There's a
her.
fear, yeah.
The football community.
Right.
Like, can you curse on this podcast?
I think we should start, yeah.
Fuck the Irish football community. You know what I mean? Again, they
But what even is? But
no.
What is the Irish football community? This is a very
I want
important
to
point.
qualify my fuck the Irish
Yeah.
football community by saying, again, I understand how many people work really hard, but you see the resistance to Mark Cannam's calendar year stuff. You see people putting out statements like they're making a statement on, we will never, I'll
Not
be
now, not ever.
Not now, not ever will we switch. As if it was like, this was like some deep, like, you're talking about the sort of, the 32 county republic or something, rather than a calendar. And, that sort of resistance to change. And, you see it, and you see it with like the DDSL and the girls football, the underage football, all this stuff that, ends up consuming people. Irish football, because, and again, it comes back, Irish football has existed on nothing and has lived on fumes.
Dion's contention, is correct. That definitely, there is, it's like a couple of years ago, actually not that long ago, there was this sense. There's always been this attitude to maybe the independent directors coming in and so on that we need to take our game back. Was one. Take it back where?
Yeah.
Where have you taken it before? And that is probably. I know what you're saying. The problem with me is that, and this is the funding thing and everything, that the Irish football community, I know it's just a phrase, but the Irish football, it's never actually had the chance to breathe, because there's that representative, there's that layer in front of them of the same old characters who are convinced that things should be done this way, and it's the same people and the same face. The football community on the ground has never had the chance to argue to shine.
And what I mean is this idea that you must actually organise because of what you anticipate as the objections and the difficulties that you're going to find, and yet you're going to find them, and we and like Dan's that thing you do here about taking the game back, that is an extraordinary statement to make when you should be looking at going, right, we haven't really, and and I know there's so many people, and again there's so many people in clubs around the country say, if we had this, if we had that, and it's correct, like if we had some facilities, even just on a very basic level of kids playing football, kids being able to play during the winter. But you also say, right, we need to say, okay, need to sort of a bit of self-criticism and self-awareness to say, we haven't really done anything. We haven't got much, but whatever we've got, we must look for help, and maybe we need outside help, and we need new ideas, because what we've done with what we've had hasn't really got us anywhere.
For the remainder of the podcast, we are talking about the 10th of October 2024. Is how we're going to finish, when Ireland will play Finland. On the Greek performance, the England performance, I think we'd agree, like, there's no point talking about it. It was just so awful. The Greek performance obviously was a 2-0 defeat. I reminded myself of it this morning. The first half was not bad. It was not bad. There was a real attacking threat down the right-hand side. Molumby was hitting these 30, 40-yard rakers. He had one of his best games for Ireland, I thought. One of those 30-yard rakers was to Ogbene, who chested and volleyed, and it was the greatest goal he's never scored, the offside. Will Smallbone had a licence to get forward and did, and he was running in behind Ogbene and getting to the byline and pulling balls back. No attacking threat down the left, granted. Defence was perfectly reasonable. It was a good first half. I think that's kind of been lost and forgotten a touch. It was a good first half, especially on the back of the England performance. Second half, we did our tried and tested conceding from range. Darragh O'Shea, Nathan Collins stepping back, the Greek number 8 thinking, I have to shoot here, no option. They're still stepping off me. Okay, I better shoot, goal. And then I would say just confidence, the toll of the last 24 months came into it, and just Ireland like wilted, and Greece got on top and it looked horrible, and then Matt Doherty played himself out of the squad with his mistake at the end. But it wasn't horrific, I would put to you, Dan. So what do we take from that game heading into Finland? We're moving away from our 3-4-3 days. That's part of the story here.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think the thing is that whatever formations, and that's probably one of Heimir's things, is don't obsess about formations. I think the England game, they started with 2 central midfielders on the pitch. Like the Ireland squad, when it's listed now, as you can see, there's generally a lot of defenders, a lot of forwards, and then there's like maybe 5, 6 midfielders in the middle. And if you look at the England game, they started two of those players, and against Greece, they effectively started 4 of them. You know, with Molumby, Brown, Smallbone, and Jason Knight, who sort of played a bit
inside
narrow.
lefty. Yeah.
So, and if you look at the last couple of years, there's no doubt that Ireland's better results. It's not so much about the back three. It's been about whether it's 4-3, 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. And often, like, some of the better performances have been with 3 in the middle. And the thing about Greece as well is that Smodics was also, there was no Adam Ida or Evan Ferguson. Smodics was played through the middle, because there is a feeling that that's possibly his best position. But again, does his best position align with where Ireland need him to play? And that's obviously one of the debates now. So for this squad, you see again in the 6 midfielders category, Josh Cullen is back, Smallbone is out. So you've got Cullen, you've got Molumby, you've got Jason Knight. Alan Brown is coming back from injury, so he didn't make the cut, which I'm surprised. But I think anyway, he hasn't met it this time. And you've got Jamie McGrath recalled, Finn Azaz, and there's one other player, I'm trying to think who it is, Jack Taylor from Ipswich.
Yeah.
So the question is, like, will there be 3 of those on the pitch now on Thursday? And I would imagine that there will be. Will they have a back 4 or a 3 behind them? We'll have to see, because the Matt Doherty thing was, and I think we spoke about this briefly last week, it's not to labour the point, but Seamus Coleman is unavailable. If Matt Doherty was a part of the future, I think he'd really be in this squad.
Yeah.
You know, you could maybe, if you had Coleman, okay, let him go. Ireland have always had fullbacks, and now Ireland don't have fullbacks, really.
Omabamidele?
Well, that's where he played in the last game. You see, you know, Festi Abasele is possibly more of a wing back, really, at heart. Okay. So, if, you know, Callum O'Dowda was in the squad, and then he's dropped out, and they haven't called in a replacement again. It's like, well, surely you call some of these people who are still in your plans. So that would suggest that Robbie Brady at left back, or maybe Liam Scales is going to be the other left back. So I think what we'll see probably will be 3 midfielders and possibly a back 4. Yeah, possibly a back 4. And then it's a question of what is the potential shape of your front 3. Like Ogbene, you would imagine, would be involved. You'd imagine Smodics, but I think you probably have to play an Eder or a Ferguson in these games.
Oh, I think so. We'll come to Ferguson in a moment. Before that, John O'Shea yesterday, our former interim manager, was speaking, a couple of interesting quotes. If you tell me we're going to play terribly but beat Finland, we'll take it. That is now the new mantra. And here he is as well, talking about the derogatory way that we're talking about our players.
I think it's one of them. I think we need to get away from almost that negative aspect of positions in the team and the squad and players, because the dedication and the sacrifice that every player and the levels these players are playing at, I think, is sometimes forgotten about. They're really good players. They're playing at a really good level. And I think it's a bit of a, not a nonsense, but we're kind of too derogatory towards these players, because they're really good players that are playing at a really good level, and they're showing dedication to want to come and play for Ireland. So I think we should be getting behind them a bit more.
Thought that was interesting, Dion, because I would say in advance of Kenny, there was a raging debate about the standard of the players. Is it the players? Is it the manager and the system not getting the best out of these very good players? They're just waiting to be unleashed if we could play more progressively and prepare properly. The way Martin O'Neill isn't was kind of the tone of the conversation. I now think post Kenny, one of the unfortunate consequences of the Kenny era is that your average person is now of the opinion we just don't have the players, and I think that's what O'Shea is really picking up on there.
Yeah, and there's and a little bit of it, and you know, it all goes in cycles. Like a little bit of the sense that was there at the end of Steve Staunton, that you know the players just need a kind of someone to kind of get tough with them, and to, you know, they're just you know, they're like, again, they sort of the way Matt Doherty was sort of, you know, and I understand that people's anger and response to how, you know, that goal was conceded, but at the same time it's like we need a scapegoat here. We need
I think people like a bit more stick. And I know a couple of former pros who feel there was far too much arm around the shoulder under Kenny.
Well, maybe, but again, I think there's a cycle in it, and John O'Shea is now responding to that cycle, because, you know, again, when Trapattoni got the job, I remember, like, one of the things that everyone was so excited about was they looked at the clip from Bayern, you know, when he was like hammering the players, and like, you know, they're all big time.
Oh, don't get me wrong. In 3 years, and everyone was like, in 3 years, we'll be saying this new manager who's more holistic and wants to play progressive football is just what we need. We like, there is that boom and bust cycle. I get it.
And I ultimately, I think, like, it's a tough position in Irish to be not a tough position to be an Irish international footballer, but you do not get, like, you have had to succeed in a way that very few sports people in this country, like, you've have to do. Yeah. Like, you've gone into the toughest environment. Yeah. If you've made it at Championship or Premier League level,
you're a phenomenon.
You are a phenomenon. Yeah, you are an absolute phenomenon.
It's easily forgotten.
Yeah. You know, and like any of these players, if you anyone who saw these players when they were coming up through, you know, schoolboy football in Ireland, would be thinking, you know, these guys are the best players.
And yet it looks like we can't keep the ball for 10 minutes.
And what's interesting about that, I think, has been pointed out elsewhere, like John O'Shea. And I remember I spoke to him myself. It was after the Portugal game in June in Aveiro, and it was sort of the small huddle after. And he was possibly more critical of players then, saying lads need to maybe take decisions in their career. I think that was more pointed at maybe the career Championship players who maybe need to, but. You know, obviously it flips over time.
I think he's picked up on the tone in the
I think we have to come back, and I know we want to stick with October the 10th, right? But we're going to stick with that date. But like, I think Sammy Smodics is a very relevant point to that, because like there's questions this week about Liam Delap, you know, who actually isn't eligible to play for Ireland at the moment, as far as I understand.
I just feel like we'll find a way.
But but like this, again, we're
how you saw Irish football. We're judicial review.
But we're reaching around now, sort of like, I think sometimes as well, it's like there's a craving for the saviour player to emerge.
But sorry,
like
that's
our transfer,
okay.
Who can we get?
But that's okay.
But well, it is okay. But the reality is that they're very rarely better than what we have already. Like I think I underestimated Smodics, and yet maybe there was a sense he's going to take us to another level. He can't do that. Like, these players that you're recruiting now are coming in to join a squad of lower Premier Championship players, which individually is a massive achievement. I completely agree for all these players. Sometimes they're denigrated completely unfairly based on comparisons with the past. Like, they're all very good players, and they probably should be better than the results that they've got. But equally, the balance of the squad is weighted against that too. And that's maybe
I think on that, and I think O'Shea's point after Portugal is interesting, because when people make the very shorthand connection, you know, we don't have the players at the big clubs anymore like we used to, there's an obvious reason for that, which is, you know, English clubs don't choose from just Ireland anymore. So it's a global game, and we are, you know, in theory then the players are no worse than the players who went and played for Liverpool and Manchester United 30 years ago.
There's also a resentment that they can earn 20 grand a week in the Championship.
Yeah, but that's true.
Years,
but the other thing, the difference is, and this is where I think there is a difference, and this goes to O'Shea's point, is that by being at those clubs, by maybe earning 20 grand a week for, whether you finished 16th, 14th, 8th in the championship or whatever, compared to what the players who played for Liverpool and Manchester United had to do as professionals every week. They're diminished.
Yeah,
so they're not talent wise. They may be no different, but in terms of how they evolve and what's required from them week by week, you then see that translated into suddenly you're playing for Ireland with all this scrutiny. There's nobody else going to help you out. This is on you.
Yeah.
And that seems to, then they kind of shrink with that responsibility. And that is one of the things
That's
I think
a fair point,
Just to make one point, I know I went through the forward options as well.
Yeah.
Mikey Johnston is one I shouldn't have mentioned. He was absent last month. I think the use of wingers with Hallgrímsson is going to be. I mean, that was
big.
It's going to be a big thing.
Well, we need to sort out our left hand side. Ogbene is
Johnston can do that. Yes. That's the thing.
Well, that would be good because at the moment we don't attack down our left hand side. Just a word on Evan Ferguson before we finish. Still only 19.
Yeah.
I had a moment this morning. I was like, "What is he? Evan's probably 22 now, is he?" Still only 19. Since that hat trick, Newcastle won 3 goals for club and country. What was really reassuring, and I get, is he recycling what somebody told him to feel about the situation, or does he feel this way? You hope he feels this way. I wouldn't say I'm going out of my way to score a goal. I'm just playing how I'm playing. I'm not trying to force it. If you start doing that, you start overthinking, and you can end up going backwards. He's certainly saying the right thing, and you hope he's feeling it.
Well, when we talk about the cult of the manager, and again, to the saviour player, we haven't had one too often. So now that we have one, you can see that there's going to be a huge, he's not, as you said, he's 19, and all our conversations, we need to kind of, hopefully some more players come along, because we need to give this guy, you just need to give him a chance.
Yeah.
And you need to give him, and Dan's right. So he's a victim of success. Everyone is so excited by what he can do, that it's hard not to want to focus everything on if he's on the pitch, if he progresses. Obviously, this season has started slowly for him, but we got to kind of moderate our own conversations around him, which is very hard to do because there's nobody else that we're going to get. Probably not as hopeful and as excited about.
Is Ida, by the way? I mean, we're watching him in Champions League for Celtic. He's coming short and spinning in and running behind and finishing really well. He's looking like a real player at the moment. Yeah,
Adam Ida was one, probably his divided opinion amongst probably even, I guess, ex-pros and stuff when he was getting the chance under Stephen Kenny. Some were like, what's this about? Others like, no, he could be the best of them. This is pre-Ferguson. It was of that Ida, Parrott, Aaron Connolly.
I spoke to John O'Shea at an off-the-ball roadshow.
They loved him, yeah.
And he was like, this guy, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a tough one because, again, English football is so competitive now as well. And, there was some attitude from Celtic fans when they signed him because of his record at Norwich. Yeah. But actually, if you look at Ida over the last couple of years, he'd played very little football. It was only 10 minutes here, 12 minutes there. To go back to Ferguson, I will say, I think, there's a lot of pressure on him in Ireland because he is the one, and as a result, his Barron run is highlighted, whereas there could be 10 Evan Fergusons in England, and one of them could be having that year, and it's never even discussed. I don't think he can get away as well, though. I think there's a lot of pressure probably around him. I would think, he's at a selling club. I think there's people probably around him who anticipate that this is, they're aware that is it this window? Is it the next window? Is it 12 months? Is it 18 months? I've heard it various times. Won't be any more than a year before he moves, Okay. And he's had a couple of niggly injuries at times in the last year, which makes people nervous as well because you have to protect your asset as well. And I think there's a lot of factors at play there that I would have massive sympathy for him. But I mean, there was some big clubs still knocking on the door during the window, and I think even at times during this Barron spell, you see these moments in games where it's I don't think there's a blooper reel of Evan Ferguson misses. I don't think he's necessarily got into situations, and Brighton played a different style of play under De Zerbi to what they're playing at the moment. There's a lot of very obvious reasons why he's struggling, but because he is our guy, you can't get away from it. We'll talk about this window. We'll talk about the next window if he doesn't score in this window, and if he hasn't scored in the meantime, and probably every window for the next 5 years. If there's a couple more of them, it's easier. Yeah,
Brighton I'm not so worried about. I think he'll get his move, and the manager point is right, and they're not going to risk their asset, which is the reality. becoming more injury prone by rushing him back. I guess what you're hoping for in the short term with Ireland is that we manage to create an environment and build a team in such a way that lets him feel really comfortable, really good, and scores. Because he's going to have ups and downs in his club career.
And he's not to run the chance. And the point about Ida as well, and this is the big thing about Ferguson, people say it's just a basic, well, Ireland needs to be horrible to play against and get back to basics. But we actually don't really have the players to do that, which is a slight issue, in certain departments. And maybe Adam Ida is more of an old school, run the channels, number 9, get it down to him.
Yeah.
Although his hold-up play sometimes can be, that's what maybe annoys people. Evan Ferguson, you see him play for it, like his natural instinct is to come short. And so again, you need to find a way, and it's that's like the problem. The concern certainly with Evan Ferguson would be he's a very good player, but how do you actually find the best way to include him? And is that with 2 strikers? And if that's with 2 strikers, then do you have to lose one of those midfielders that you need? And I think that's the bigger, that's the football issue there.
The other thing I do hope is that because of, you talk about him as an asset, but he's also from an Irish point of view, being a saviour, that there isn't too much. Because you look at him, and I was just so struck when he came on in the last games, how big he is, physically.
Yeah, great physique.
But he's only 19.
Yeah.
So you've got to be, you have to be careful with him as he's still developing.
Yeah.
And yet we're we need Evan Ferguson.
Yeah.
And Hallgrímsson needs Evan Ferguson, and yet for the long-term future of the player and for Irish football, you need to kind of say, well, can he? We have to.
Delicate stage.
And look at the little football he's had this year, and yet it's get him out there.
Yeah, play him 90,
and you've just because you look at that physique and you think, right, that as he develops, he's going to be so strong. But you also have to watch out and worry, because that's the kind of development when you start picking up injuries and you are in danger. And if you push him too hard, it's going to be bad for everybody.
We are out of time. Are Ireland going to win on Thursday?
I wouldn't be feeling optimistic about Sunday. I think Thursday.
Sorry, did I say Sunday? I meant I'm not even thinking about Sunday.
Well, I mean
Thursday.
Well, you see, you need to take a broader
No, just
look
Thursday.
at the window.
No,
Joe.
just Thursday. Thursday's our best chance.
It is, yeah.
So what do you think?
I feel it will be a draw.
Okay.
Yeah.
A perfectly acceptable draw, Dion?
Yeah, it'll be a draw.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll be talking about it obviously on Friday. Dion Fanning, nice to have you back here in
Thanks, Joe.
Street. And Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, flying out to Helsinki, writing in the paper tomorrow, of course. Thanks so much, Dan.
No worries.
Dan McDonnell and Dion Fanning there in studio. Conan, I was chatting about it afterwards, and Dan was behind me, and I didn't realise, and I was sort of making the point to Mary, who's our head of audio, our supervisor. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that makes her sound ominous. She's not. And she was asking how the chat was. I was saying, really good. I mean, it's the kind of chat that's been had a lot, but the 2 boys were just so passionate about it that it kind of made it worked. And Dan was like, my ears are burning. What are you saying? I was like, it's all right. It's only good things. They were, though. And I think, I've been talking with Dan a long time, and Dion, obviously. I think he won't mind me saying, he said it as much himself. Dan is at a point now where he's so thoroughly fed up / depressed with the state of Irish football at large that he's actually, he wants to talk about that, and he's finding, okay, we have to beat Finland, but there's such a big issue to be sorted out. I think that's where both boys were. I'm not sure they wanted to get into the who would you play at right back against Finland kind of conversation, and they were kind of so forceful. I said, well, have at it. There'll be plenty of time this week to talk about the actual football. So maybe no harm that there was a bit of a state of the nation feel to that conversation, because that's what they wanted to do, I think.
And look, let's let that game come to us. Last week we had already been doomed thinking about international football's coming up.
Yeah.
And, it wouldn't have felt as right or as exciting going straight in talking about the Finland game, but coming in and talking about the state of Irish football. And now if Heimir lights it up, if we've got more talking points, we'll be there and we'll be ready.
Yeah. That's us for today. We have Gunter Steiner on the show tomorrow, and rugby on Thursday, and I guess some football on Friday, and we'll figure it out. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Conan, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.